the overall agenda for this morning's session. So you've had your sort of welcome introductions. We're going to just do a little bit of refresher from workshop one. I'm not sure whether everyone was able to make it to workshop one, but it was also before Christmas. So we'll do just a very quick refresher over some of the key information, a bit of a reminder, I suppose, to people as to what our expectations are. And looking at the sort of the timeline then in terms of not only obviously your submission, but then what happens after the submissions, just so that people then can be aware of the process. Hopefully this won't take very long, and then we'll really try to move very quickly into the discussion group with the members of the editorial boards and yourselves then, so that you can get an opportunity to start talking about your the article that you're planning to write. And obviously if there are any questions that come up, over particularly in terms of the presentation, then obviously you'll be able to address those in the breakout room with the members of the editorial board, or if you want to put it into the chat room and we'll pick up on those queries and questions then. Okay, so just a wee refresher then in terms of the theme that we have for the next year's journal is going to be challenging racism and creating a more inclusive society. So you'll see here we've outlined 6 sort of topics around that overall theme. I'm not going to read them out for you. You can obviously read them there yourselves. These are, I suppose, really just some suggestions that the editorial board has come up with around this overarching theme. So it's worthwhile obviously trying to look and see whether the idea that you have for your article fits in with one or more of these topics. But again, if you feel that maybe your article doesn't really fit with any of the topics that are listed there, but you feel that it is fitting in with the overall theme, then obviously that is still something that we would be interested in. So the list, I suppose, that we have come up with the topics, isn't an exhaustive list, so there may well be other ideas that you have that you feel, fit with the overall theme. And of course, in your work, the breakout room, you'll be able to maybe chat more about that with the editorial board members as well, particularly if you have any concerns then around, how you can ensure that your article is going to fit with the overall theme. And whilst an article that is presented to us that maybe doesn't fit with that theme, we're not saying that we absolutely wouldn't publish it for this year's journal. But obviously because we have stated that it is going to be a special edition, then we are particularly interested in articles that do fit in with that overall theme. So you will increase your potential, I suppose, for having a successful contribution if you do demonstrate how your article is fitting in with that overall theme. So I think it is something worthwhile kind of thinking about. Okay, so just move on to the next slide then. Thanks, Ruby. So again, just a little reminder in terms of we do have 2 main types of articles. So you have the more theoretical or critical debate papers, which are 8,000 words maximum. And then the practice-based papers, which are 3,000 words maximum. Now, it is important that you recognise that these are maximum word limits, so you can obviously be under the word limits, but you really cannot be over it. So, and I really can't stress that enough, because quite often we do receive articles in that might be 4,500, 5,000 words, so they're kind of sitting in between. And as editorial board members, we don't know, when we're reviewing those papers, does the author intend this to be a practice-based paper or, the theoretical? And obviously, because it's, they're maybe not long enough to be a theoretical paper, because if they're maybe sitting at 4,500, 5,000 words, they're maybe not dealing with the critical debate and analysis in sufficient depth. But yet they're way over the word count for the practice-based. So you're really, I suppose, chunking up problems for yourself further down the line, that if we do then decide, that we're still interested in your article, you're either going to have substantially add to it to make it fit within the theoretical sort of critical debate type 1 paper, or you're going to have to take out quite a substantial amount of material then to bring it down to the level that's going to, make it fit within the practice-based section. So it's something to think about, that the word count is the maximum word count. By all means, you can be under it, but try to think about where you're sort of best placed. And the types are quite different, really. They're both peer reviewed, so it doesn't mean that the 3,000 word practice-based papers are valued any less than the more theoretical. It really just depends, I suppose, on where your interests predominantly lie. So you see, obviously, with the type 2 practice-based, it is much more about exchanging some ideas about maybe particular programs or contexts in which you're working in, which are innovative. So that's important as well. You need to be getting across what's different about what we have done, or something that you've tried that's quite new. So it is, yes, about sharing examples of good practice, but there needs to be that sense, I suppose, of uniqueness or something different that you've tried. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that has worked well either. If there have been lessons learned from something that you tried that didn't work very well, again, we can be interested in those as well. But as I say, thinking about, maybe some particular program or project, or maybe a very small piece of research that you've been involved in. Whereas obviously in type 1, because it's a more substantial article, then it may not necessarily talk to a specific example of practice, but may rather engage more in a critical debate and analysis of maybe key concepts around adult learning, and as I say, particularly obviously in relation to the theme, or policies around adult learning, again, that might relate to sort of racism and multicultural societies, and diversity and inclusion, all of those things. But again, it may relate, theory and practice as well. It may be from, key findings from maybe some research that you've been carrying out. And so you obviously need to make sure that you include the methodology around that particular research. Okay, so yeah. In terms of the criteria, then this is the criteria that we use for both types of articles. So it is important, again, yes, to state that even for the practice-based articles, you should be discussing something that's significant and relevant to the field, and have a well-developed theoretical framework. Now, I say, obviously, with the type 1 articles that are 8,000 words, there's much more space there to develop that theoretical framework, and we would expect papers within that type, to go into much more depth around their theoretical framework. But even with the type 2, practice-based, if we are discussing a program or a small project or whatever, we would still expect that there is some theory that relates to that particular practice. And again, with criteria 3 around the methodology, again, that's more obviously important within the type 1 type articles, and particularly where, you are discussing a piece of research. It's really important that you make clear, what was the methodology for, carrying out your research, how many participants were involved, all of the things that you would do, if you're writing that research paper. So you need to be very clear about that. But equally, in your practice-based paper, if you're discussing a program, we want to know how long did the program last, how many people were involved in it. If you're talking about how successful it was, then you need to be clear about what were the measures of success that were used. So just thinking about being very clear and transparent about how you went about either the carrying or developing this particular program or project, or if it was a piece of research. Imagine you're talking to someone who has never heard anything about your particular research or program or project, and you need to really start from scratch. Don't be making assumptions that we all know what you're talking about. The criteria 4 there, that the findings really, should be insightful and relevant, so I think that's where this idea of, suppose, of something new, something innovative, something creative, something different. We want to, even if it's, maybe a continuation of research that's already been carried out, or a project or program that has been evolving over a number of years. We want to hear what's new about this, what's exciting and interesting about this, that, that people might also be able to take lessons from in their own particular context. It's important then, obviously, that you do follow the style guide. And as I said, just making sure that you meet the word limit, or stay within the word limit, is normally the issue. And then, your article should be organized well, that it's in clear structure, follows a normal, clear sort of structure, and written well in terms of, using good English, and, writing in an academic style. Okay, so we do have a style guide, and you can see the link to the style guide in this slide, and these slides will be made available to you after the workshop. And again, you can go on to the journal online, and quite easily see most of the information that I'm presenting here is very readily available. So make sure that you do follow the style guide that we have provided. You may have produced articles for other, or contributed to other journals in the past, and each journal will have their own particular sort of conventions. So again, you're just saving yourself a lot of heartache down the line, if you try to get it as right or as perfect as possible first time round. And again, you're increasing your chances really of being accepted, or being accepted maybe with only very minor revisions, then, if you try to ensure that you do follow all of the format and conventions and the academic reference style that we use, a Harvard reference style. But again, there can be small differences within the Harvard reference, and according to whichever sort of particular method you follow. So it is important to say that you go into the style guide that's on that, listed there on that URL, and try to, as much as possible, to, and it's worth taking your time just to try and make sure that you do follow that. Any articles then that don't follow that, will be returned to you then, for you to make those changes. So say if you get it right first time around, you're making life a lot easier for yourself, and obviously increasing the chances then that you're going to be successful. Okay, so just to highlight, the deadline is very quickly looming up. So we have 5 p.m. on Friday, the 14th of February. And you will need to email your completed article. So I realize it doesn't actually say it on this slide, but the full article needs to be submitted at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 14th of February, and the email address that you sent it to is there on that slide. Along with your article, then you should also send a small separate document that includes the title of your article. You state which type you want to submit, so at least that makes it clear to us that it's a type 1 theory or a type 2 practice article. You should also give then a short profile of yourself, a maximum of 100 words, and then provide a short abstract for your article, again maximum of 100 words. Okay, and the kind of thing then that we would expect your abstract to include would be just a short introductory overview of the article. You just tell us what is the overall article about, what is it, what are its aims, what does it set out to do, what methodology you have used, where that's applicable, and then state how the article relates to adult and community education, and maybe in particular, because this is a special edition, to mention how you feel it relates to the overall theme for this special edition. Okay, so we've just got a couple of little examples here just to give you an idea. So here's just a little example of a short profile that someone has produced. So you can see, this is just really to give a little bit of background, I suppose, to yourself. It's a sort of a short bio, really. just, giving us a little bit of example of what your background is. So you should use the third person. So you talk about yourself in the third person, so put your name and what your sort of background is, mentioning what your relevant roles and the experience you have, particularly within, adult and community education, or, if it's in relation to the key theme, then maybe if that's relevant as well. And, indicating what your particular areas of interest or expertise might be. It's only 100 words, as you see there, it is quite short, so it's really just a few sentences. Again, we have a little example here just of an article abstract. So again, it's really just a couple of sentences, which really sort of gives you the overview of, what is the focus of the article that you have submitted. As I say, where appropriate, you state what the methodology is. So you can see here in this one, they've just stated that it's, semi-structured interviews. So you're not going into the whole methodological process. You'll obviously do that later in the actual article. It's first very briefly stating it and then highlighting how this article is going to contribute to adult and community education. Okay. So what happens next? So this is really just give you, I suppose, the timeline of when things will happen. So you'll submit your article by the 14th of February. By the 24th of February, then articles will all be anonymized and sent to the editorial board for peer review. So I think that's important that that all articles will be anonymized. So even if you know somebody on the editorial board, we won't know who you are. And obviously, if anyone does have any conflict of interest within the editorial board, they'll state that, so that your article will go to someone or two people on the editorial board who, don't have any close knowledge of you. By the 24th of March, then the editorial board will meet that week then to agree the decisions on the papers, and you will then be sent feedback by the 4th of April. So at that stage, you'll be sent the initial decision, which I'll go through in a little minute. And then, any comments, sort of detailed comments, if your article has been accepted but needs some revisions. So your next deadline then will be the 2nd of May, that you'll need to return your articles then with all of the suggested revisions completed. Then the week starting the 5th of May, the articles will be sent out again to the editorial board. So whoever has reviewed your, done the first review on your article, it will be those same peer reviewers who will receive your revised article. So they're obviously looking to see, have you made the changes that have been suggested? And if you haven't, you give a reason why you don't think it's appropriate, or, you're not able to make those changes. But obviously you try as much as possible to make the changes that have been suggested by the editorial board. So really between May and July, then the editorial board and the editorial office will continue to work with the authors through the revision process. So if there are further revisions that still need to be completed, and it may be, some of that can be around the referencing, or just maybe more minor kind of corrections that need to be finalized. And then by the week beginning the 21st of July, then the final articles will all be compiled and reviewed by the editorial board and the editorial office. So that then really by August, then we begin the process then of, collating everything together and copy editing. And by November 2025, then the edition of the Adult Learner will be published, and you'll hopefully be able to see your work in print and online. Okay, so just looking at the, give you a little bit more idea around the sort of peer review process. So as I've said, it's important that you submit your full-length article using the style guide. Your article then, as I've said, will be peer reviewed, and it'll be anonymized before the members of the editorial board get to see your article. You will get some general feedback. So there'll be like a feedback sheet that goes out to you with the decision, as well as just some sort of summary overall feedback. But I suppose more importantly, I think what's probably most useful for authors is that you will also receive then a tracked changed document that has specific feedback. So where there may be some general comments that, articles maybe need to provide more information around their methodological approaches or the theoretical framework or whatever. But within, if you go into your actual document, you will see very specific comments then that will obviously help you to address some of the issues maybe that are concerns that the editorial, your peer reviewers have. And obviously try to say as best as possible to address those. And if there are any queries or things you don't understand, then that's where obviously you can go back to the editorial office. The staff in Aontas can act as a sort of a liaison between you and the peer reviewers if there are any comments that maybe you're just not clear what the reviewer is asking for. Please do feel free to come back to us, and we want you to be successful. We want this to be a collaborative and learning process. So as I say, we certainly are here to help and facilitate that. So as I say, once your the article has been peer reviewed, then we will be making a decision on that, and you will get that in the feedback. And you can see just at the very end of this slide here, the decision outcomes for articles. So basically you'll get accept, which means that it's just your article is accepted, that there are nothing further to be done. To be honest, I think it's been very, very rare, if ever, that we've received an article that doesn't need even some kind of like minor change. So don't be disheartened if, you get back a decision that is, accept on condition of minor changes, because that is probably the most common decision that's made, so that there will be some minor changes that need to be made. Usually they are of more of a superficial nature, so it can be around referencing or the sort of style guide or academic writing style. It can also be, maybe some minor changes just around, you need to provide a little bit more detail about, the program or the research that you've been discussing. But usually, those are changes, I suppose, that can be quite easily made. Or if you have gone slightly over the word count, then we would ask you maybe just to, and we would give some suggestions as to where you can reduce your word count if it is just a little bit over. The third decision then would be revise and resubmit. So this is where we feel that, an article is worth publishing. We feel that there is merit there for that article to be published, but that there may be more substantive changes required. So again, that could be where someone has gone, either way over or way under the word count. So, the example I was saying earlier, an article that comes in at 4,500, 5,000 words, and we're really not sure, is it a practice article and needs to be substantially reduced, or is it a theoretical article that needs to be, substantially added to? Or it could be where, maybe the author has gone off at a complete tangent, or they're not really addressing, what they set out. So they might have set out what it was the paper was supposed to address, but maybe haven't really met that, or, perhaps the theoretical framework is, a bit kind of flimsy on it and really needs to be more substantial. So but again, I would, suggest people, please don't be disheartened either, if you get that decision of revise and resubmit. I guess depending on what stage you're at the minute with your article, and we all recognize the pressures that people have with working and then, trying to, submit an article for publication. It may be that, this deadline has suddenly jumped up at you. So, sometimes it's a good idea to even, give it your best shot, do as good a job as you can and get it in by the deadline. But maybe knowing that, you may get that decision of revise and resubmit, but that still gives you another bite at the cherry. That gives you an opportunity sort of further down the line then to be able to make more substantive changes and get your article, to the stage that you would also be happier with it. As well. And there is obviously the final decision of reject, where, really if the article is not meeting, any of the criteria mentioned previously, if it's clear that that your article really isn't, meeting sort of the the theme in terms of, that we have set out, or, we can't really see how that specifically relates to adult and community education, we may well make a decision then that, we're probably not the best journal for you to be submitting in. It doesn't necessarily mean that your article is not worth publishing, but, we might suggest that, you look to other arenas to publish that would be maybe more relevant to your particular area of expertise. Equally, it may be that, we feel that it really isn't up to scratch for publication at the minute. And sometimes we will, advise authors maybe to take another year and, come back to us in a year's time to, where they have had more time maybe to work up their document, or maybe it could be the stage that your research or your project's at, that maybe, in a year's time, things would have moved on, and that there's actually maybe more, substantial sort of findings to report, or, something more innovative and creative that you can discuss. So as I say, again, if you do get a rejection, again, I hope, try not to take it too personally either. And as I say, we do always give feedback to authors regardless of the decision, because we do want it to be, a positive and a learning experience for everyone. So obviously, once you get that decision, sorry, just go back, then you'll have that opportunity to make your revisions, and you'll send that back to the editorial board. As I said earlier, in terms of the timeline, then there'll be that opportunity, sort of back and forwards, I suppose, with the editorial board and ourselves and the authors, then just to make sure that the article then is ready for publication, and you have included all of those information around your sort of biography and signing a copyright statement. Okay, so that's us finished sort of giving that sort of brief overview. So I don't know whether, there may be some